Despite being considered a high-performing school district, marked racial disparities were present here as they are in schools all across America. Student testimonies and artwork spoke to the daily experience of race in our schools. We came to learn that hate crimes are most common in cities like ours, mostly white and changing rapidly. Denial was no longer an option.
It became all-consuming. There was no place that you could go that people weren't talking about it, with all sorts of opinions, with fear, with guilt, with tears, with anger.
And it was like this moment where the community just could no longer deny that we had racism happening here. And I think that's the hardest step for people to make. And I think there's a lot of people still who haven't made it. That was the beginning for a lot of people of recognizing we can't just pretend everything's fine. We have to actively address this.
The city was undergoing an identity crisis. The tension made us re-examine what type of city we lived in.
Davis has some wonderful, wonderful programs to be proud of, teachers to be proud of. Its achievement level in many areas should be a source of pride. But an area where we are comparing Davis to other communities as it relates to students of color is not a source of pride.
I don't feel like this community is being the community I wanted to. I don't feel like I'm any longer a part of it in the way I used to feel that I was.
We all are here because we want the privileges that are available for raising children in Davis.
Sometimes across the country, again, we tend to respond to crisis as opposed to doing preventative kinds of things.
I don't think we get this. It's just not something we get, and I certainly didn't fully get it.
We're not a colorblind society.
We don't mention that race could be a possibility.
There's something more to this than what I see or what other people see at the face value, and that it must run deeper. It might not be something I understand, but I'm not going to judge it either.
Maybe that hate crime was a catalyst to get some of the movement's gears clanking to create social change in Davis.
I don't think I really had the resources that I needed to be able to do something about it.
We really wanted to do something that wasn't just, let's stick them in a workshop, let's do another committee.
It's always seemed to fizzle out, or maybe they come up with a product, you know, usually a paper, or they're going to invite some consultant to talk, and then after that it just dies.
Over the summer, a diverse group of community leaders met to ponder the next steps. This group included Tansy Thomas, a 40-year resident and community activist of Davis, and former chair of the City of Davis Human Relations Commission; Rick Gonzalez, director of the Yolo County Mexican American Concilio; Jan Marie Garcia, a pediatrician and president of Becca; and Mariko Yamada, then a deputy county supervisor and now a California State Assembly member. They decided on 3 topics to pursue: youth involvement, parent involvement, and further research of the educational disparity data. But given how strongly students had spoken out over the previous year, they decided to focus their efforts on increasing youth involvement. 2 other people at that community meeting were Nancy Erbstein and Jonathan Linden. In 1990, they co-founded an organization called Youth in Focus, a nonprofit that works with Central Valley schools to balance educational inequalities.
Youth in Focus is really a very powerful concept, a very powerful idea. And the power behind that idea is that the people who experience events ought to have a role in directing what happens to them.
Young people are taken through an 8-step training process over the course of several months. In a bold move, the school district decided to partner with Youth in Focus in Becca to give its high school students a place to talk about race and to help them be a part of the solution.
And they chose us as one of 6 or 8 community groups up and down the Central Valley for an initiative that was working on educational justice and juvenile justice.
There was a lot of uncertainty and nervousness about starting up. What would happen with it? How would it work? What would they produce? Well, what's going to come out of it? Or is this going to be another thing that makes the district look bad?
Is it something that's going to make the school look bad and draw negative attention to the school, which, you know, as a principal you never want to do. It just seemed like we were doing the right thing. We were doing the right thing by kids.
And it took a lot of guts for him to do this, and a lot of guts for Mike to say he would support us and let us do it.
In the case of Davis High, the training process for the first cohort or group of students took place during the 2003-2004 school year and culminated with the final presentation in May 2004.
We're talking about who would be invited to be part of this group. That's when I said, you know, it cannot be just the high-achieving kids, the 4.0s.
So it was a real different classroom setting in that there's a lot of different kids from a lot of different backgrounds, and not just racially or ethnically, but also very much religiously, economically, which all make a huge difference too.
And you know, when you work with a lot of kids, you see an incredible amount in them to be a leader, to influence others. We picked and we got an incredible group of kids.
To tell you the truth, I didn't see myself doing this.
I didn't even really know what it was about.
I thought it would be like, you know, kind of like a standard club.
We were having a hard time figuring out if it was really something that was different.
From what I heard, it sounded like a bunch of, you know, like super, like, you know how Davis has like the above 4.0 kids. I thought it was like a bunch of those kids punching numbers, going out there like a live action crew, like getting some shots of like hate crimes going on.
I mean, that was one thing that confused me in the sense of like, okay, we're doing research, like what does that mean?
I seriously thought like it'd be something nice to put on a resume. Like, no joke, like that was my first initial thought. Like, this will look great on a college app.
I didn't have any expectations. I just joined because I kind of wanted to do something different.
We were getting together as a group to talk about race, and I don't talk about race much.
The community partnership was led by Jan Marie Garcia and Courtney Tesler, a counselor at the high school.
Well, the evolution of it was fascinating to watch because at the beginning, remember, everyone sat in their little groups based on ethnicity.
The first few months with all the conversation was pretty annoying.
Because, I mean, when we started out, we were 26 people, I think. So, I mean, you put 26 people, you tell them, like, we want to make a difference. What are the problems in Davis? Everyone comes up with something different, and none of them overlap.
It was really uncomfortable, really uncomfortable talking about race, because you don't talk about race in school. You know, I talk to my friends, but they're black, so, you know.
It was kind of hard to talk about it at first because I didn't know who these people were.
We were all on different pages. We were all, some of us were comfortable talking about race, and others were just, didn't talk at all, period.
Like the first year it was tough. It was like a lot of talking. It was a lot of getting to know people.
Jan, we thought we would be doing something. Like, we thought there would be research involved. Where's the research? We're just talking with each other. What is this?
So there's something to be said for adults setting up arenas where it's safe to cross those boundaries and where it's expected that you will, that's one of the skills you're going to get. And we're going to sit back as adults and let it happen, but we're going to facilitate it too.
I've never defined myself by my race. That was always something that was really uncomfortable for me because a lot of people do. And I think for the first couple meetings in Youth in Focus, I felt like all people were doing was looking at each other, and this was all about race.
I think I've been pretty privileged growing up, and I didn't encounter as many experiences.
That created some tension too when we're talking, and some students are saying, I don't agree with you, you know, I don't think race is a big deal.
It was awkward, just kind of being a white kid there, and I'm just like, I had never been in a room with so many racially diverse people.
When you're first sitting there, you kind of like, is it okay to say what I'm thinking? Is that okay with you guys?
I was afraid to say anything, because I mean, I was afraid to sound like a racist, you know, like I felt like anything I would say, I would come off as sort of the arrogant white kid.
Jan explained to us, she said, you know, can't give you guys a question. I can't help you guys get a question if you guys aren't a unit, if you guys can't understand each other, because then we're just going to be working against each other, and we're not going to be able to do this. We're not going to be able to function properly.
The Youth in Focus staff noticed students were having a hard time discussing race on more than a superficial level, so they held an all-day retreat at DQ University.
The one event I think that we did that kind of brought everyone sort of to the same page, to the same level, was going to DQ University.
Well, DQ University was the first tribal, Native American, and Chicano college to help uplift education of Native and Chicano people to transfer into the higher education of universities such as UC Davis and Stanford.
I didn't even know DQ University existed, and one of the parents who was taking us there was joking with us. She was just like, this is Native American territory, but don't worry, you won't need any passports.
But it was fun for me to sit back and kind of watch everyone else take it in and see what their reaction was, because it's not every day you go to a Native college or Native university and see what's going on there.
Going to different places like historical sites, like the DQ University, and seeing just being in a place that has very important history of resistance within Davis was very empowering.
So it's a big deal to a minority group of people that we never really think of. And it's funny that it's just outside of Davis. It's so close to home, but you don't even hear about it that much here.
Jan had people write a poem about sort of their race in Davis or their racial experience in Davis. And Nez wrote hers, and I think that was one of the first times I really figured out how important this was to people that weren't white, that it had sort of a negative experience in Davis.
What is my race? They asked me to write down my race, and I think very seriously. And I consider writing down the truth and having it read. I have a super caring mother who suffered a great deal to make my life easier, who told me I can, and who is strong for me and who loves and cares for me no matter what, inside this body. I have a missing father who's a part of me biologically, who missed out on raising me and seeing me succeed, and who won't get to see me graduate inside this body. A part of me, I am a part of a rich culture and a dying heritage, but I am proud of it. I dance like my ancestors danced before me, and I am proud of that. My people have so much good to give to the world, but we were forced from our homelands. Instead we were called savages and forced our children were forced into boarding schools where they were beaten and often died. They asked me to write down my race, and I think very seriously. And I considered writing down the truth and having my answer read. I have a stereotype that I'm a loser, that I'm an alcoholic, a druggie, that I'm a statistic, that I will have my first child at a young age, that I will not go to college, and that I'm a failure waiting to happen inside this body. I have a feeling that I'm going to succeed. I know I can do whatever I want. I also know that I'm more privileged than other Native kids, and I know I shouldn't take that for granted, but sometimes I do, and I'm sorry inside this body. I have an understanding that there's more than one kind of Native. So doesn't anyone care? How come we don't get an extra box like the Asians to specify which type of Native we are inside this body? But I stop, and I simply write down American Indian, Alaska Native.